What if I told you that a cartoon sponge who flips burgers for a living has been teaching us the most important life lessons for over 2 decades? While most people dismiss SpongeBob as just kids' entertainment, this yellow optimist has been dropping wisdom that most adults desperately need to hear. From handling failure and peer pressure to understanding friendship and authenticity, SpongeBob SquarePants contains some of the most brutally honest truths about human nature ever put on screen. Keep watching for the shocking lesson about honesty that will completely change how you handle your biggest mistakes, plus the controversial truth about why most people are looking for happiness in all the wrong places. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to our channel. The first lesson we're diving into is one that sets the tone for the entire SpongeBob series. Optimism can literally transform any situation. SpongeBob SquarePants shows us in the very first episode that your attitude actually changes what happens to you. Picture this. It's SpongeBob's big day. He's been dreaming about working at the Krusty Krab for years. This is his life's dream. The Krusty Krab represents everything SpongeBob values, making people happy through food, being part of a team, and doing something meaningful with his life. But here's the thing, nobody expects him to succeed. Squidward sees him coming and literally panics. Mr. Krabs doesn't take him seriously. Even SpongeBob himself has a moment of doubt, telling Patrick, "I'm not good enough." Most people would see these red flags and either give up or go in with low expectations. But SpongeBob, he chooses optimism. Not blind optimism, he's nervous and scared, but he decides to believe in the best possible outcome anyway. The moment SpongeBob walks into the Krusty Krab, everything goes wrong. He trips on a nail and bounces around the restaurant like a pinball, making a complete fool of himself. Mr. Krabs and Squidward exchange looks that basically say, "This kid is hopeless." Any normal person would be mortified, make excuses, and leave. But watch what SpongeBob does. He gets up, dusts himself off, and immediately asks, "So, when do I start?" His optimism is so genuine that it's almost naive. When Mr. Krabs gives him an impossible task, finding a hydrodynamic spatula with port and starboard attachments and turbo drive, Squidward and Mr. Krabs laugh because they think they're sending him on a wild goose chase. They expect him to come back empty-handed and defeated. Here's where SpongeBob's optimism becomes a superpower. Instead of seeing this as a trick or getting discouraged, he sees it as his chance to prove himself. He salutes Mr. Krabs and heads out with complete confidence that he'll find exactly what he needs. While SpongeBob is out proving everyone wrong by actually finding that impossible spatula, disaster strikes the Krusty Krab. 5 buses full of hungry anchovies show up, and they're not interested in waiting politely in line. These fish are hangry, and they're taking it out on everything in sight. Mr. Krabs and Squidward are completely overwhelmed. The anchovies are destroying the place, tossing them around like they're in a hurricane. Mr. Krabs is literally crying for his mommy. Squidward is having a breakdown. The situation looks hopeless. They're about to lose everything. Then SpongeBob returns. Not only has he found the impossible spatula, but he shows up right when they need him most. And here's the beautiful part. His optimism doesn't waver for a second. He sees a restaurant full of destructive, angry customers and asks, "Who's hungry?" Most people would see chaos. SpongeBob sees opportunity. What happens next is pure magic. He's flying around the kitchen with his new spatula, making Krabby Patties with the kind of joy and enthusiasm that's absolutely infectious. The montage shows him chopping vegetables, flipping patties, and serving food like he's conducting a symphony. And the anchovies, they go from destructive mob to satisfied customers in minutes. SpongeBob's genuine excitement about feeding people transforms the entire atmosphere. The fish who were ready to tear the place apart are now happily eating and leaving peacefully. Mr. Krabs goes from thinking he's about to lose his business to making more money than he's probably ever made in a single day. Squidward witnesses what happens when someone approaches work with pure enthusiasm instead of cynicism. This episode sets up the fundamental truth that drives the entire SpongeBob series. Optimism is a force that changes reality. SpongeBob succeeds because of it. Think about what would have happened if SpongeBob had approached this day with realistic expectations. He probably would have been too nervous to even apply. If he had applied and been given the impossible task, he would have assumed it was a joke and given up. The anchovies would have destroyed the Krusty Krab, and Mr. Krabs would have learned that taking chances on enthusiastic people is a mistake. But because SpongeBob chose optimism, everyone's life changed for the better. Mr. Krabs got an employee who would make him rich, Squidward got job security, the anchovies got fed, and SpongeBob got his dream job. The lesson here is that optimism changes how you approach problems, which changes the actions you take, which changes the results you get. SpongeBob's optimism made him try harder. think more creatively, and see opportunities where others saw obstacles. This is why SpongeBob succeeds in situations where more realistic people fail. He acts like good outcomes are inevitable, so he puts in the effort to make them happen. The first episode teaches us that your attitude really can transform any situation, but only if you're willing to back up that optimism with action. SpongeBob acts on positive thoughts with everything he's got. Our next lesson comes from one of the most relatable struggles in all of SpongeBob. Persistence pays off. Boating school shows us something that hits way too close to home for most of us. Failing at something over and over again, but refusing to give up. SpongeBob has failed his driving test 38 times, and he's still showing up with the same enthusiasm as day one. Here's what makes this episode so powerful. It's not about instant success or natural talent. SpongeBob is terrible at driving, but he keeps coming back because he believes that eventually all that effort will mean something. And here's the controversial part, he's kind of right, even when he fails again. SpongeBob has been taking driving tests for who knows how long. The guy knows every answer to the written portion before Mrs. Puff even asks the questions. He's studied, he's prepared, he's done everything right on paper, but the moment he gets behind the wheel, everything falls apart. Sound familiar? This is the story of anyone who's ever struggled with something that seems easy for everyone else. Mrs. Puff has become his personal nightmare. She's probably inflated more times because of SpongeBob than any other student in boating school history. Yet she keeps scheduling his next test. And SpongeBob? He keeps showing up. Most people would have given up after the 5th failure, maybe the 10th if they're really stubborn. The morning of test number 38 starts like all the others. SpongeBob wakes up with complete confidence that today will be different. He throws away his unicycle because he's so sure he'll be driving home. This level of optimism in the face of repeated failure is either inspiring or completely delusional, depending on how you look at it. When he arrives at boating school, he aces the written test again. He knows every nautical term, every rule, every regulation. His problem has never been knowledge, it's application. The moment Mrs. Puff tells him to start the boat, his brain short circuits. He goes from confident student to panicked mess in seconds. And then he floors it. Straight into a lighthouse. Again. Mrs. Puff inflates like a balloon and some guy in the crowd yells, "My leg!" Probably the same guy who's been watching SpongeBob crash for 38 straight tests. This is where most people would quit. This is where most people would say, maybe driving just isn't for me. But SpongeBob doesn't quit. That night, when he's talking to Gary about his failure, he's not talking about giving up. He's frustrated, sure, but he's already thinking about the next attempt. This is when Patrick comes up with the brilliant, terrible idea to help him cheat with a walkie-talkie hidden under a cowboy hat. And here's where things get interesting. With Patrick's help, SpongeBob actually drives perfectly. He follows every rule, handles every obstacle, and is about to pass the test when Mrs. Puff makes a joke about someone giving him answers through a radio. The moment SpongeBob realizes he's cheating, everything falls apart again. He crashes into the same lighthouse. Mrs. Puff inflates again. Fred yells, "My leg!" again. SpongeBob fails again. But here's the thing, even though he failed, he proved something important. When he had the right support system, he could actually drive. His repeated failures were because he was overthinking, panicking, and getting in his own way. The episode ends with SpongeBob apologizing to Mrs. Puff and promising to try harder next semester. The guy just failed his 38th driving test, and he's already planning his 39th attempt. Most people see this as SpongeBob being naive or stubborn. But here's the controversial truth. SpongeBob's persistence is actually teaching us something profound about success. Every failure was teaching him something. Every crash was showing him what not to do. Every moment of panic was preparing him for the time when he wouldn't panic. The episode ends with him riding away on his unicycle with Gary, completely unbothered by his failure. He's already planning his next move. This is what real persistence looks like. It's about getting back up every single time you fall down. SpongeBob's 38 failures were preparation. Each test taught him something new about himself, about driving, about dealing with pressure. When he finally does get his license, spoiler alert, it takes him many more episodes, it'll be because he outlasted every obstacle, every setback, every reason to quit. The lesson here goes way beyond driving tests. How many people give up on their dreams after the first rejection, the first failure, the first time someone tells them they're not good enough? SpongeBob shows us that persistence is about being too stubborn to quit. Sure, maybe 38 failures seems excessive. Maybe most people would call it time to find a new dream. But SpongeBob's refusal to give up is exactly why he eventually succeeds at everything he attempts. He sees failure as practice. Moving on to another powerful lesson that hits different. Kindness is contagious. Christmas Who shows us something most people don't want to admit. One person's genuine enthusiasm can literally change an entire community. SpongeBob learns about Christmas from Sandy and manages to spread that joy to every single person in Bikini Bottom, except the one person who needed it most. Before this episode, Christmas didn't exist underwater. Think about that for a second. These fish had no concept of giving gifts, decorating trees, or spreading holiday cheer. They were just living their regular lives, probably complaining about the same stuff they always complain about. Then SpongeBob shows up with this wild story about some guy in a red suit who gives away free stuff, and suddenly the whole town goes crazy with excitement. This is where most people would roll their eyes and call SpongeBob naive, and honestly, they'd have a point. The guy hears about Christmas once and immediately becomes the town's Christmas evangelist, telling everyone about Santa Claus like he's been celebrating the holiday his whole life. Most people would be skeptical, ask questions, maybe do some research, but SpongeBob, he just believes with his whole heart. Sandy explains Christmas to SpongeBob in her tree dome, telling him about Santa, elves, and the whole magical story. SpongeBob's reaction is pure wonder. His eyes get huge, and you can see him mentally planning how to share this amazing discovery with everyone he knows. Most people learn about something cool and keep it to themselves, or maybe tell one friend. SpongeBob immediately thinks about how to spread this joy to his entire community. The next day at the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob is standing on a table like some kind of Christmas preacher, explaining the holiday to Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs. He's selling them on the dream. He talks about writing letters to Santa, getting free gifts, and the magic of believing in something bigger than yourself. And here's where it gets interesting. Patrick immediately buys in because he's Patrick. Mr. Krabs gets excited about free stuff because money is his love language, but Squidward calls the whole thing ridiculous. He's the voice of reason, the adult in the room, the guy who knows that jolly prowlers breaking into your house sounds more like a crime than a holiday. But SpongeBob starts helping everyone write letters to Santa, sets up a bottle shooting mechanism to send them to the surface, and basically becomes Bikini Bottom's Christmas coordinator. People are lining up to write letters asking for front teeth, new hats, even a pony with saddlebags full of money. Then comes the music montage, and this is where SpongeBob's kindness really spreads like wildfire. The whole town gets into the Christmas spirit. They're chopping down coral trees, decorating everything in sight, and singing together like they've been doing this for years. Even the trash smells sweet on Christmas, apparently. But the real proof that kindness is contagious comes when they decorate Squidward's house without asking. Most people would be furious if their neighbors covered their property in holiday decorations. Squidward definitely is, but everyone else is so caught up in the joy that SpongeBob started, they think they're doing something nice for him. Christmas Eve arrives and the whole town is gathered around the decorated coral tree, singing and waiting for Santa. They stay up all night, completely convinced that this magical gift giver is going to show up, because SpongeBob believed it so strongly that he made them believe it too. Of course, Santa doesn't come. Reality crashes down hard. Everyone leaves disappointed and angry, calling SpongeBob a liar and saying he wasted their time. This is the moment when most people would say, "I told you so," and walk away feeling superior. But then something beautiful happens. SpongeBob, heartbroken and humiliated, still gives Squidward a handmade present. He carved a clarinet out of driftwood with Squidward's name on it, complete with little wooden Squidwards that pop out when you press a button. Even in his lowest moment, SpongeBob's first instinct is still kindness. This is what breaks Squidward. He realizes that SpongeBob was genuinely trying to spread joy. All the decorating, the letter writing, the excitement, it was all about making other people happy. And Squidward, who spent the whole episode being cynical and mean, suddenly understands what real Christmas spirit looks like. So Squidward dresses up as Santa and shows up at SpongeBob's house. But here's where the lesson gets even deeper. The kindness doesn't stop with just making SpongeBob feel better. A little girl shows up asking for a present, and Squidward, despite having no plan and no gifts, gives her a wrench. And she loves it. Then more people show up, and Squidward ends up giving away everything he owns, his furniture, his food, his belongings, just to keep the Christmas magic alive that SpongeBob started. A guy who spent the entire episode complaining about Christmas ends up sacrificing everything to preserve the joy that one person's kindness created. The episode ends with the real Santa actually showing up, proving that SpongeBob was right all along. But that's not really the point. The point is that SpongeBob's genuine enthusiasm and kindness transformed an entire community. He took people who had never heard of Christmas and turned them into believers. He took a cynical grouch like Squidward and turned him into someone willing to give away everything to make others happy. This episode teaches us something uncomfortable about kindness. It works, even when it seems stupid. SpongeBob's unwavering belief in magic and goodness changed everyone around him. His kindness spread through the community like a virus, infecting even the most resistant people. The controversial truth here is that most of us are more like Squidward than SpongeBob. We see genuine enthusiasm, and our first instinct is to be skeptical, to point out why it won't work, to protect ourselves from disappointment. But SpongeBob shows us that sometimes the naive person who believes in goodness and spreads joy is actually the smartest person in the room. Kindness really is contagious, but only if someone is brave enough to be the first one to spread it. SpongeBob didn't wait for someone else to bring Christmas to Bikini Bottom. He did it himself, with nothing but pure excitement and love for his community. And by the end of the episode, even the biggest grouch in town was willing to sacrifice everything to keep that kindness alive. Let's dive into another powerful truth that most people don't want to hear. Hard work has its own rewards. Employee of the Month gives us one of the most controversial takes on work ethic you'll ever see in a cartoon. SpongeBob has won Employee of the Month 26 times in a row, and he genuinely believes the award matters. Meanwhile, everyone around him thinks he's an idiot for caring so much about a job that pays minimum wage. Here's the setup that makes this episode so brilliant. SpongeBob works at a fast food restaurant. He flips burgers for a living. In most people's eyes, this is the kind of job you're supposed to hate, the kind of work you do while you're waiting for your real career to start. But SpongeBob approaches his job like he's performing surgery or running a Fortune 500 company. The episode starts with SpongeBob reminding Squidward that Employee of the Month judging is about to begin. Squidward immediately tells him the award is a scam, that Mr. Krabs only gives it out to make employees work harder for no extra money. This is where most people would nod along and agree with Squidward. After all, he's just being realistic about how corporate employers manipulate their workers. But SpongeBob completely rejects this cynical view. He tells Squidward that having pride in your work is the only thing that makes it all worthwhile. Think about that for a second. SpongeBob just said that pride in your work is more valuable than money, recognition, or career advancement. In today's world, that sounds almost insane. When Mr. Krabs warns SpongeBob that Squidward might actually win this time, SpongeBob panics. The thought of losing the award genuinely devastates him. He starts imagining Squidward's picture on the wall, laughing at him. Most people would say SpongeBob is taking this way too seriously, but that's exactly the point. SpongeBob starts working even harder, trying to flip patties twice as fast. When a patty gets stuck to the ceiling, he's mortified. He begs Squidward not to tell Mr. Krabs because it might hurt his chances of winning. For SpongeBob, even the smallest mistake feels like a failure because he holds himself to impossibly high standards. Then something interesting happens. SpongeBob starts to doubt himself. He wonders if Squidward is right about the award being meaningless, but instead of giving up, he has a conversation with his Employee of the Month photos on the wall. His past achievements literally give him a pep talk, telling him this is war and he needs to fight for what he believes in. This is where the episode gets wild. SpongeBob decides he has to stop Squidward from winning, so he sneaks into Squidward's house in the middle of the night to destroy his alarm clocks. He digs holes in front of Squidward's door, boards up windows, and sets elaborate traps. SpongeBob essentially becomes a workplace saboteur, all in the name of winning an award that pays nothing extra. But here's the thing, Squidward gets pulled into the competition too. Despite claiming the award is worthless, he can't resist the challenge when SpongeBob questions his competence. Squidward says he could win Employee of the Month with his tentacles tied, and suddenly he's just as invested in the competition as SpongeBob. The two spend the entire night setting traps for each other, neither one getting any sleep. They drag anchors and boats, trying to tire each other out. When morning comes, they're both exhausted but still determined to outwork each other. The climax happens when they both arrive at the Krusty Krab and start competing to see who can be the better employee. SpongeBob cleans floors so aggressively he breaks the mop. Squidward cleans tables so hard he breaks them in half. They start cooking Krabby Patties at superhuman speed, trying to prove who's more dedicated. The result, they make so many patties that the entire Krusty Krab explodes. Thousands of burgers rain down from the sky, and people think they're getting free food. Mr. Krabs is furious because his restaurant is destroyed and people are eating his product without paying. Most people would look at this ending and say it proves Squidward was right all along, that caring too much about work just leads to disaster. But that's missing the real lesson. The episode never actually says SpongeBob was wrong to care about his job. The disaster happens because they turned work into a competition instead of focusing on the actual purpose of the job. SpongeBob's original approach to work, taking pride in doing his best, caring about quality, wanting to excel, was actually perfect. The problem started when he let fear and competition corrupt his pure work ethic. When he was just focused on being the best employee he could be, he won 26 months in a row and was genuinely happy. The controversial truth this episode teaches is that finding meaning in your work doesn't depend on what other people think of your job. SpongeBob flips burgers, but he approaches it with the same dedication that others bring to prestigious careers. He works hard because he believes good work is its own reward. This lesson hits different in a world where everyone talks about quiet quitting and doing the bare minimum at work. SpongeBob shows us what happens when you bring passion and excellence to whatever job you have, regardless of how others perceive it. The fulfillment he gets from his work isn't dependent on salary, prestige, or even recognition from others. The episode ends without revealing who won the award, but that's the point. The real reward was never the plaque on the wall. It was the satisfaction SpongeBob got from caring about something and giving it his all. Even when the competition corrupted that pure motivation, his underlying belief that work should matter never wavered. SpongeBob's work ethic teaches us that you can choose to find dignity and purpose in any job, or you can choose to be miserable and cynical. The work itself doesn't determine your experience. Your attitude toward the work does. And sometimes the person who seems naive for caring too much is actually the wisest person in the room. Now we come to a lesson that most people struggle with their entire lives: stay true to yourself. The smoking peanut shows us what happens when guilt eats away at someone who did something wrong, and how being honest, even when it costs you everything, is the only way to live with yourself. SpongeBob throws a peanut at a sleeping oyster and spends the entire episode wrestling with whether to confess or keep his mouth shut. In the episode, SpongeBob and Patrick visit the zoo on free day to see Clamu, the giant performing oyster. But when they get to Oyster Stadium, Clamu is fast asleep. Patrick gets bored and starts to leave, but SpongeBob really wants to see the show, so he does what most people would probably do. He throws a peanut at the oyster to wake it up. The oyster wakes up all right, but instead of performing tricks, she starts wailing at the top of her lungs and thrashing around violently. Zoo workers rush in trying to calm her down, but she's completely out of control. The whole zoo has to evacuate because there's nothing more dangerous than an emotionally disturbed oyster. When a zoo worker asks SpongeBob and Patrick if they did anything to cause this disaster, Patrick immediately says no and calls anyone who would upset a gentle giant a jerk. SpongeBob hides his bag of peanuts and agrees. This is the moment where SpongeBob makes his choice: lie and protect himself, or tell the truth and face the consequences. Most people would probably make the same choice SpongeBob makes. It was just a peanut. He didn't mean any harm. Nobody saw him do it. Why ruin his life over an accident? But that's exactly what makes this episode so powerful. It shows how that harmless lie starts eating away at him immediately. SpongeBob goes home thinking he can just forget about it and move on. He tells himself it will all blow over by tomorrow. Then he turns on the TV and sees that Clamu's crying is so loud it can be heard around the world. The news calls whoever did this cruel, careless, and evil. They show people in different countries covering their ears because the sound is so powerful. This is where SpongeBob's guilt really kicks in. He tries to get advice from Squidward and Sandy, but both of them are furious about what happened and want to find and punish whoever is responsible. Sandy literally rips a phone book in half to show what she'll do to the culprit. SpongeBob realizes he can't confess to anyone because they'll all hate him. Meanwhile, Patrick decides to investigate the crime. He's running around playing detective, looking for clues, determined to catch the person who upset Clamu. The irony is that Patrick is SpongeBob's best friend, but SpongeBob can't even tell him the truth because Patrick already said anyone who would do this is a jerk. The guilt gets so bad that SpongeBob starts falling apart. SpongeBob gets so nervous that his body parts scatter and reattach in the wrong places. He's becoming a physical mess because of the mental stress of lying. Then the police show up. They question SpongeBob about being at the zoo, about the peanut, about being with Patrick. SpongeBob confesses to everything they ask, but instead of arresting him, they arrest Patrick. The police somehow conclude that Patrick is the culprit based on the evidence Patrick himself gathered while investigating. This is SpongeBob's worst nightmare, that his best friend is being punished for something SpongeBob did. Patrick gets taken to Oyster Stadium, where an angry crowd starts throwing peanuts at him as revenge. Patrick even accepts the punishment, saying he gets what he deserves. Most people would probably let their friend take the fall rather than admit they were the real criminal. After all, Patrick seems okay with it, and SpongeBob would only make things worse by confessing now. But SpongeBob can't live with himself knowing an innocent person is being punished for his mistake. So he runs to the stadium and stops the crowd. He admits that he threw the peanut. He apologizes to Clamu, to Patrick, and to everyone in Bikini Bottom. He says he knows what he did was wrong and he's sorry. This takes incredible courage because he knows everyone will hate him, and he might face serious consequences. The crowd immediately decides to throw peanuts at both SpongeBob and Patrick. But before they can, a zoo worker reveals that Mr. Krabs is the real criminal. He stole Clamu's pearl, which was actually an egg. The oyster was crying because someone stole her baby. Here's the beautiful part of this episode. SpongeBob was technically innocent the whole time. The peanut didn't cause Clamu's distress. But SpongeBob didn't know that when he confessed. He was willing to face punishment and hatred for something he believed he had done wrong. That's what real integrity looks like. The episode teaches us that being authentic means taking responsibility for your actions, even when it's scary or costly. SpongeBob could have stayed quiet and let Patrick take the blame. Nobody would have ever known the truth, but living with that lie was destroying him from the inside. Staying true to yourself means being honest even when honesty hurts. It means admitting your mistakes even when you could get away with hiding them. It means caring more about doing the right thing than protecting yourself from consequences. SpongeBob shows us that authenticity requires courage, but it's the only way to live with yourself and maintain genuine relationships with others. If you're still watching our video, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Another lesson that'll change how you see challenges. Patience is a virtue. Pizza delivery takes SpongeBob and Squidward on what should be a simple delivery job and turns it into an epic survival story that tests every ounce of patience they have. What starts as a quick trip around the corner becomes a desert odyssey that proves good things really do come to those who persevere through challenges. The whole mess begins with a last-minute phone call to the Krusty Krab. Someone wants pizza delivered, and Mr. Krabs, seeing dollar signs, quickly agrees even though they don't make pizza or do deliveries. He smashes some Krabby Patties into a pizza shape, throws it in a box, and sends SpongeBob and Squidward off to deliver it. Simple enough, right? Wrong. SpongeBob doesn't have his driver's license yet, but Squidward doesn't want to drive either. He tells SpongeBob it's just around the corner and to do what he does in driving school. This is where patience first becomes crucial. SpongeBob needs to stay calm and follow instructions. But when Squidward starts yelling, "Back it up," SpongeBob panics and reverses the boat for miles and miles until they run out of gas in the middle of a desert. Most people would lose their minds at this point. They're stranded in the wilderness with no transportation, no supplies, and a pizza that's getting cold. Squidward definitely loses his patience. He kicks the boat in frustration, which causes it to start up and drive away without them. Now they're really stuck. But SpongeBob maintains his optimism and suggests they deliver the pizza on foot. This is where the episode becomes a masterclass in patience and perseverance. They face obstacle after obstacle. SpongeBob's pioneer tricks that almost get them run over by a truck, massive windstorms that blow them around like toys, and eventually a tornado that sucks them both up into the air. During the tornado scene, Squidward begs SpongeBob to let go of the pizza, but SpongeBob refuses because it's for the customer. The pizza actually saves their lives when it works like a parachute, but they land even further from civilization with no idea which way to go. SpongeBob suggests following the moss on a rock because moss always points to civilization, another pioneer trick. Squidward completely loses his patience here and goes the opposite direction, confident he knows better. The irony is that SpongeBob was right. The moss was pointing toward a nearby city, but because Squidward couldn't wait and trust the process, they end up walking even further into the desert. As time passes, both characters become exhausted and hungry. Squidward's patience completely breaks down and he demands they eat the pizza. He tries to tempt SpongeBob by opening the box and describing how good it looks, but SpongeBob resists because he knows they made a promise to deliver it. This internal struggle shows how patience often requires fighting against immediate gratification. The turning point comes when SpongeBob spots a large boulder and realizes they can ride it like the pioneers used to do. Squidward mocks this idea and goes on a rant about how all the pioneers are dead because they were idiots. But then SpongeBob proves him wrong by actually riding the rock, and suddenly they have a way to reach their destination. When they finally arrive at the customer's house, their patience is rewarded. Sort of. The customer is initially happy to get his pizza, but then he gets angry because there's no drink with it. Even though he didn't order a drink, he berates SpongeBob, throws the pizza in his face, and slams the door. This is the ultimate test of patience. After everything they went through, getting lost, facing tornadoes, walking for hours in the desert, the customer rejects their efforts over something he didn't even order. SpongeBob breaks down crying, and Squidward, who finally understands the value of SpongeBob's dedication, gets revenge by smashing the pizza in the customer's face. The episode reveals its final lesson about patience in the last scene. When they get back on the rock to go home, it turns out the customer's house was right across the street from the Krusty Krab the whole time. Their entire epic journey could have been avoided if they had just been patient enough to ask for better directions at the beginning. But here's the thing. Even though their journey was technically unnecessary, it wasn't wasted. SpongeBob's patience and determination throughout the ordeal showed his true character. His refusal to give up, his commitment to doing the right thing even when it was difficult, and his willingness to keep trying when everything went wrong. These qualities are exactly what patience teaches us. The episode shows us that patience means continuing to work toward your goal even when everything goes wrong, even when other people lose faith, and even when the reward seems impossible to reach. SpongeBob's patience turned what could have been a complete disaster into a story of perseverance that strengthened his character and earned Squidward's respect. Sometimes the journey teaches us more than the destination ever could. SpongeBob's epic pizza delivery proves that good things really do come to those who refuse to give up. Our next lesson comes from The Chaperone, and it's about staying true to yourself instead of becoming a fake version that you think others want to see. The Krusty Krab is completely dead. Mr. Krabs is standing next to a free salad bar trying to smile, but there's literally no one in the restaurant. Squidward is daydreaming about being a ballet dancer while SpongeBob obsessively cleans tables. Then Pearl crashes through the door crying so hard that she floods the entire place with her tears. Her long, tan, and handsome prom date just dumped her the day before the dance. Mr. Krabs is desperate to cheer up his daughter, so he suggests taking her himself, which makes her cry harder. Then he suggests Squidward, even worse reaction. Finally, he points to SpongeBob as the solution. Pearl is horrified. She tells her dad that taking the fry cook would ruin her reputation and get her kicked off the most frequently pictured in the yearbook committee, but with no other options, she agrees, on one condition. SpongeBob has to promise not to embarrass her and not to do that other thing you're always doing. Here's where SpongeBob makes the classic mistake. Instead of just being himself, he decides he needs to transform into someone completely different. He gets a magazine called Long, Tan, and Handsome and uses it as a blueprint to remake his entire identity. The transformation is ridiculous. SpongeBob builds himself massive stilts for legs, gets a spray tan, puts on fake eyelashes, and squeezes into a tuxedo. He's so tall now that he needs a crank system just to lower himself down to talk to people. But in his mind, this fake version is what Pearl and her cool friends will find acceptable. Prom night arrives, and everything that can go wrong does go wrong. His stilts make him completely unstable. When he tries to get punch, he can't reach anything and ends up covered in red liquid. During photos, he knocks over the backdrop. Pearl's friends ask to meet her date, and she's so embarrassed that she tries to hide him. The disaster reaches its peak when SpongeBob tries to dance. Everyone else is doing the whack, shouting this synchronized chest-bumping move. SpongeBob claims he invented it, but when he tries to jump on his fake legs, he crashes into another couple and sends them flying through the food table. They smash through a painting, and the whole gym erupts in chaos. SpongeBob runs into the bathroom crying. He's convinced he's ruined everything by being a prom failure. Pearl follows him in and tries to comfort him, but SpongeBob is devastated. All his effort to be someone else has made everything worse. Then something beautiful happens. Pearl tells him she's actually having fun, and they decide to finish their dance. SpongeBob asks if he can still wear his wig, but this time, instead of trying to be sophisticated, he just starts being himself. He teaches everyone the sponge, this completely ridiculous dance that's pure SpongeBob energy. He's not trying to be cool anymore. He's singing about sticking your leg in the air and jamming the other one up there, twisting around and giving a big lunge. It's absurd and silly and totally authentic. And you know what happens? Everyone joins in. The whole prom transforms from this stuffy, formal event into a wild party. People are laughing and dancing and having the time of their lives. Sure, they're also getting injured left and right, and paramedics have to come in with stretchers, but everyone is genuinely enjoying themselves. Eventually, they all get thrown out because the dance destroys the decorations. But as they're walking home, Pearl drops the most important line in the episode. "I knew it would be a disaster all along, but as far as disasters go, that was really fun." The episode ends with a brilliant twist. The SpongeBob that Mr. Krabs congratulates is actually a dummy. The real SpongeBob shows up to collect his prop, revealing that even he's learned to recognize when he's not being genuine. We've all been SpongeBob at some point. We've all tried to change ourselves to fit in or impress someone. Maybe you changed how you dress around certain people, or started liking different music, or pretended to have interests you don't actually have. The episode shows us that this strategy backfires every single time. When SpongeBob tries to be long, tan, and handsome, he becomes clumsy, uncomfortable, and miserable. Everything goes wrong because he's not operating as himself. He's trying to be this artificial version that doesn't actually work. But when he drops the act and just starts being SpongeBob again, magic happens. People embrace his weirdness. They want to join his ridiculous dance and be part of his authentic energy. The lesson couldn't be clearer. People can sense when you're being fake, and it makes them uncomfortable. But when you're genuinely yourself, even if that self is weird, silly, or unconventional, you give others permission to be authentic too. That's when real connection happens. SpongeBob teaches us that the right people will appreciate you for who you actually are, not for who you think you should be. And the people who don't appreciate the real you, they weren't worth impressing in the first place. If you're still watching the video, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Another lesson that SpongeBob teaches us comes from One Krabs Trash, and it's all about how greed can completely backfire on you. Mr. Krabs is having a yard sale, but calling it a fine antiques sale to trick people into paying more money. He's literally just dumping trash from garbage cans onto a rug and spraying air freshener on it to mask the smell. When customers come by, he lies about everything. Telling someone a broken umbrella belonged to the Queen of Switzerland, calling Patrick's old toilet plunger a 17th century soup ladle. SpongeBob shows up and falls in love with a soda drinking hat. He thinks it belonged to someone who was number 1 because of the number 1 printed on the front. Mr. Krabs sees this as another easy sale and charges him $10, money SpongeBob doesn't even have. The kid is so excited that he runs home to scrape together every penny he owns, searching through his couch cushions and piggy bank just to afford this hat. A collector walks up asking about the soda drinking hat. He offers $500 for it. Before Mr. Krabs can even respond, another collector offers $1,000. Then someone else offers $100,000. Finally, a guy in a rowboat floating on Mr. Krabs' own drool offers $1 million for that exact hat. Mr. Krabs realizes he just sold a $1 million item for $10. His greed kicks into overdrive. He can't stand the thought of losing all that money, so he decides he has to get the hat back from SpongeBob by any means necessary. First, he tries the honest approach, telling SpongeBob the hat makes him look like a girl. When SpongeBob asks if he's a pretty girl, Mr. Krabs actually says he's beautiful, which completely backfires. Then he tries offering SpongeBob a bag full of other novelty hats, one with a fan, one with a juicer, one that says Foxy Grandpa. SpongeBob refuses every offer because he's genuinely attached to his hat. So, Mr. Krabs escalates to outright deception. He draws a terrible ghost on a piece of paper, attaches it to a fishing line, and dangles it through SpongeBob's window at night while making spooky noises. He claims to be the ghost of soda drink hats, and tells SpongeBob the hat is cursed and must be returned to its original owner immediately. When SpongeBob asks who the owner was, Mr. Krabs panics and makes up a ridiculous name, Smitty Werbenjager Manjonson. He figures this fake name will end the whole charade, but it completely backfires. SpongeBob takes the curse seriously and actually finds a real grave with that exact name in the cemetery. Now, Mr. Krabs has to go dig up a grave in the middle of the night just to get this hat back. He's so consumed by greed that he's literally willing to defile someone's final resting place for money. When he finds the grave and starts digging, he even asks himself, am I really gonna defile this grave for money? His answer? Of course I am. But the universe has other plans. The moment Mr. Krabs takes the hat from the skeleton, Smitty Werbenjager Manjonson rises from the dead. When Mr. Krabs refuses to give the hat back, Smitty calls up an entire army of skeleton zombies to attack him. Mr. Krabs ends up fighting dozens of undead creatures with a swordfish skeleton as his weapon, shouting movie references and chopping up zombies left and right. He defeats the entire army and runs back to the collectors with his $1 million prize. But when he gets there, the collectors are laughing at him. Turns out they discovered a whole warehouse full of those exact same hats. They're completely worthless now. Meanwhile, SpongeBob walks by wearing a different hat, one with clapping hands, and all the collectors immediately chase after him, offering billions of dollars for that one instead. Mr. Krabs ends up with nothing. He throws the worthless hat away and breaks down crying while Squidward walks by and calls him a baby. The lesson here is brutal but important. Greed makes you do stupid, desperate things that usually backfire. Mr. Krabs could have just accepted his $10 profit and moved on with his life. Instead, his greed led him to lie, cheat, grave rob, and fight an army of the undead, all for absolutely nothing. The episode shows us that when you get too focused on what you might be missing out on, you end up losing what you already have. Mr. Krabs started the day making money from his yard sale. He ended it with nothing but regret, and the knowledge that his greed turned him into someone willing to disturb the dead for cash. SpongeBob, meanwhile, was perfectly happy with his $10 hat until Mr. Krabs' schemes took it away from him. Sometimes the best deal is the one you're not constantly trying to improve. Moving on to a lesson that hits close to home for anyone who's ever worked late shifts, Graveyard Shift shows us that even your dream job will have moments that absolutely suck. The Krusty Krab is closing at 8 p.m. like always. Squidward is ready to go home and spend time with his clarinet when a customer shows up asking for food. Squidward smugly points to the closed sign, but Mr. Krabs hears the magic word money and immediately changes everything. He tears up the closed sign and declares the Krusty Krab is now open 24 hours a day. SpongeBob is absolutely thrilled about this news. He sees working all night as the ultimate dream. More time at his beloved job, more opportunities to make Krabby Patties, and quality time with Squidward. He's singing about doing everything at night like it's the most exciting thing in the world. He's chopping lettuce at night, cleaning the bathroom at night, getting his hand burned on the grill at night. Mr. Krabs immediately leaves them alone to handle the night shift, saying he can't hang around all night because he has a life. So much for supporting his employees through this major change. At first, SpongeBob maintains his enthusiasm. He's doing all the tasks he never has time for during the busy day shift, washing the ceiling, deep cleaning everything. But then Squidward asks him to take out the trash, and suddenly SpongeBob's excitement hits a wall. The simple task of walking outside to the dumpster becomes terrifying because of the darkness. SpongeBob manages to do it, running outside screaming and coming back claiming it was piece of cake, but you can tell he's already starting to crack under the pressure of the night shift. Then Squidward, being Squidward, decides to mess with SpongeBob's head by making up a scary story about the hash-slinging slasher, a former fry cook, who cut off his hand, replaced it with a rusty spatula, got hit by a bus, and was fired at his own funeral. Now his ghost supposedly returns every Tuesday night to get revenge. The story includes 3 warning signs: lights flickering, phone calls with nobody there, and the arrival of the ghost bus. Squidward thinks he's being clever by scaring SpongeBob, but then all 3 signs actually start happening. The lights flicker on and off. Neither of them is touching the switch. Squidward tries to blame faulty wiring because the restaurant wasn't built to run 24 hours. The phone rings with nobody on the other end. Then a bus pulls up and drops off a shadowy figure with what looks like a spatula. Both SpongeBob and Squidward completely lose it. They're convinced they're about to die. SpongeBob confesses that he used Squidward's clarinet to unclog his toilet. Squidward admits he's always sort of liked SpongeBob. They're saying their final goodbyes. When the mysterious figure finally reaches the counter and steps into the light, he turns out to be just a normal guy looking for a job application. He brought his own spatula and explains he called earlier but hung up because he was nervous. The whole terrifying experience was just a series of coincidences. The lights were being flickered by Nosferatu the vampire, who apparently just enjoys messing with the light switch as a hobby. What makes this episode brilliant is that it shows how even SpongeBob, the most enthusiastic employee ever, can have a completely miserable work experience. His dream job at the Krusty Krab turned into a nightmare because of circumstances beyond his control. The night shift changed everything about the job he loves. The familiar became strange and scary. The routine tasks became difficult. His usual confidence disappeared. Even the most positive person can struggle when their work environment changes dramatically. The episode teaches us that loving your job doesn't protect you from having bad days, difficult shifts, or moments when you question your choices. SpongeBob spent the entire night terrified, stressed, and pushed to his limits despite working at the place he considers paradise. This is incredibly realistic. You can be passionate about your career and still have days when everything goes wrong. You can love your company and still hate certain policies or changes. You can be great at your job and still struggle when new challenges arise. The lesson here is that bad work days don't mean you chose the wrong path. Sometimes the job you love will test you, scare you, or push you outside your comfort zone. SpongeBob didn't stop loving the Krusty Krab because of one terrible night shift. He learned that even dream jobs come with difficult moments. The key is remembering that tough days are temporary, but your overall passion for what you do can carry you through them. Let's talk about a lesson from Texas that shows us how powerful it is to really appreciate the people in your life. Sandy is having a rough day at the beach with SpongeBob and Patrick. She builds a sand sculpture of Texas, but the tide washes it away immediately. When SpongeBob tries to cheer her up with karate, surfing, and jellyfishing, she turns down every activity. Finally, she admits she's feeling homesick. SpongeBob and Patrick want to help, so they blindfold Sandy and take her to her own tree dome, thinking this will make her feel better. Instead, it makes everything worse. Sandy starts crying, runs inside, and pulls down metal shutters to block everyone out. Then Sandy climbs to the top of her dome and starts singing this heartbreaking song about missing Texas. She's singing about wide open skies, 20 acres, barbecues, and pecan pies. The song is so sad that everyone in Bikini Bottom starts crying. People at the Krusty Krab, random fish on the street, even Mr. Krabs gets emotional and accidentally hits himself with the cash register. SpongeBob realizes Sandy is seriously considering leaving Bikini Bottom forever. When they go to visit her, she's already packed her bags and waiting for the bus back to Texas. She tells them she's tired of fish food and can't bear to say goodbye to everyone because it would be too sad. SpongeBob panics. He's about to lose one of his best friends, and his first attempts to convince her to stay fail completely. That's when Patrick accidentally gives him the perfect solution by insulting Texas, calling it dumb. Sandy gets so angry that she comes back off the bus to defend her home state. SpongeBob realizes this anger can be weaponized to help Sandy, so he and Patrick start deliberately insulting Texas. They're doing impressions, calling the stars dull and dim, and SpongeBob even transforms his body into the shape of Texas just to mock it. Sandy is furious and chases them with a lasso, threatening to be on them like Ugly on an ape. SpongeBob and Patrick run for their lives, leading Sandy straight toward the Krusty Krab, where their surprise party is waiting. The chase is intense. Sandy crashes through rocks, lassos Patrick, causing what looks like a nuclear explosion, and almost catches SpongeBob at the last second. When she pulls on her lasso while SpongeBob holds onto the Krusty Krab door, the entire front of the building gets torn off, revealing the surprise inside. Everyone yells, "Howdy, y'all!" And Sandy sees that SpongeBob has organized a whole Texas-themed party for her. There's square dancing, Flats holding an actual square, barbecues, Squidward holding a spiky letter Q, pecan pies, Pearl with a pie that has a can of peas in it, and 10-gallon hats, SpongeBob and Patrick wearing actual 10-gallon water jugs. The execution is terrible. SpongeBob clearly doesn't understand anything about Texas culture, but Sandy starts laughing instead of crying. She explains that home is about being surrounded by people who care about you. That's when it hits her. All these people just threw her a party. They spent time and effort trying to make her happy. They care enough about her to do ridiculous things like wear water jugs on their heads. She realizes she's been looking for home in the wrong place. She's been home all along. Sandy decides to stay in Bikini Bottom because she finally understands what SpongeBob was trying to show her. The people around her are family. The episode teaches us something most people get backwards. We spend so much time thinking about who appreciates us, but the real magic happens when we actively appreciate others. SpongeBob showed he cared through actions. The party itself was a disaster, but that wasn't the point. The point was that SpongeBob noticed Sandy was hurting and did something about it. He organized an entire event to lift her spirits. This is what real friendship looks like. When someone you care about is struggling, you don't wait for them to ask for help. You don't assume they'll figure it out on their own. You step up and do something meaningful, even if you're not sure how to do it perfectly. Sandy's realization that home is where people care about you is profound. You can live in the most beautiful place in the world and feel lonely, or you can live underwater in a pineapple and feel completely at home because of the people around you. SpongeBob shows us that appreciating your friends means more than just feeling grateful for them. It means putting in effort to understand what they need and then taking action to provide it. If you're still watching, make sure to subscribe to our channel. The next big lesson SpongeBob delivers comes through no weenies allowed, and it's a harsh truth about shortcuts. They almost always end up costing you more than just doing things the right way from the start. SpongeBob desperately wants to be seen as tough, but instead of actually becoming tough, he tries every trick in the book to fake it. The results are both hilarious and deeply embarrassing. SpongeBob and Sandy are doing karate at Goo Lagoon when Sandy completely dominates him, launching him so far that he crashes into a line of tough-looking fish. These guys are waiting to get into the salty spittoon, which is supposedly the toughest sailor club in Bikini Bottom. Only the strongest, most intimidating fish can get inside. The bouncer, Reg, immediately lets Sandy in because she's genuinely tough. She literally rips off his mom tattoo and flips it upside down to spell wow. But when SpongeBob tries to prove his toughness by opening a ketchup bottle, he fails miserably and has to ask for hot water. Reg laughs him off and suggests he go to Weenie Hut Juniors instead, or even Super Weenie Hut Juniors. SpongeBob is humiliated. He desperately wants to be seen as tough, so he starts trying every trick he can think of to fool Reg. First, he tells a story about stubbing his toe while watering his spice garden and only crying for 20 minutes. When that doesn't work, he gets a fake wig to disguise himself. Then he poses as a tattoo on someone's arm and dances when the guy flexes. Every single attempt fails because Reg sees right through them. SpongeBob is trying to shortcut his way into toughness instead of actually developing any real strength or courage. Meanwhile, SpongeBob ends up at Weenie Hut Juniors, which is exactly what it sounds like, a restaurant for wimps. The robot server keeps calling him a weenie and even scans him to confirm it. The nerds there talk about special days like Mega Weenie Monday and Double Weenie Wednesday. SpongeBob is mortified to be associated with this place. The nerds at Weenie Hut Juniors suggest that SpongeBob needs to win a fight to prove his toughness. Since he's obviously not strong enough to beat anyone for real, they recommend staging a fake fight. Patrick agrees to help by pretending to lose. The plan starts out perfectly. SpongeBob and Patrick trade insults to make the fight look realistic, but then SpongeBob calls Patrick Tubby, which genuinely hurts Patrick's feelings. Patrick gets so angry that he punches SpongeBob in the eye, giving him a real black eye. SpongeBob reminds Patrick that he's supposed to let him win, so Patrick switches to beating himself up as if an invisible person is attacking him. He throws himself around, gives himself a wedgie, and launches himself into the background while screaming. Reg is amazed. He thinks SpongeBob beat up Patrick without even touching him, which seems impossible and therefore incredibly tough. Finally impressed, Reg lets SpongeBob into the salty spittoon. SpongeBob is ecstatic. He runs into the club declaring it's the happiest day of his life. But within seconds, he slips on an ice cube and injures himself so badly that he ends up in the hospital covered in bandages. When the doctor asks what happened, SpongeBob says he slipped on an ice cube and got boo-boos. The doctor immediately suggests he should go to Weenie Hut General instead of a real hospital. The irony is perfect. SpongeBob spent the entire episode trying different schemes to fake his way into the tough guy club. Every shortcut failed because they were artificial. Wigs, fake stories, disguises. But when he accidentally created a situation that looked genuinely impressive, Patrick beating himself up, he finally got in. Then reality hit immediately. All his scheming to get into the club was pointless because he really was too weak to handle being there. The moment he stepped inside, he hurt himself doing the most basic thing, walking. The episode teaches us that shortcuts are usually just elaborate ways of avoiding the real work. SpongeBob wanted the reputation of being tough without actually developing any toughness. He wanted the status without earning it. When you try to fake your way into something, you're setting yourself up for failure in two ways. First, people can usually tell when you're being fake, so your shortcuts often don't even work. Second, even if you do trick your way in, you'll be exposed as soon as you have to actually perform. SpongeBob's hospital visit proves that belonging somewhere means more than just getting through the door. You need to actually be capable of handling what's inside. No amount of clever schemes can replace genuine preparation and authentic qualification. The real lesson is that the time you spend trying to find shortcuts could be better spent actually developing the skills you need to succeed legitimately. This episode also reveals something uncomfortable about our society. We're often more impressed by the appearance of success than actual competence. Reg was ready to let SpongeBob in based on what looked like an incredible display of power, even though it was completely fake. We see this everywhere in real life. People getting jobs because they interview well rather than because they can do the work. Influencers becoming famous for looking successful rather than actually achieving anything meaningful. SpongeBob's story is a warning about both sides of this problem. Don't be the person trying to fake your way in, but also don't be so easily fooled by impressive-looking shortcuts that others are taking. Real strength, real skill, and real achievement take time to develop. There's no substitute for putting in the actual work, even when it's less glamorous than the quick fixes everyone else seems to be trying. A lesson that cuts deep comes from Dump, teaching us one of life's hardest truths. Sometimes you have to learn to let go, even when it breaks your heart. SpongeBob and Gary are having a perfect day playing tag when Patrick joins them. At first, everything seems normal, just three friends having fun together, but then Gary starts acting differently around Patrick. He purrs and rubs against him, crawling all over Patrick's body. SpongeBob explains that this is just Gary's way of showing he likes someone, and they all laugh about it. When evening comes, SpongeBob expects to take Gary home like always, but Gary seems reluctant to leave Patrick, so Patrick suggests Gary stay over for the night. SpongeBob thinks this is wonderful, his two best friends having a sleepover together. The next morning, everything changes. When Patrick and Gary show up at SpongeBob's house, Gary completely ignores SpongeBob. Patrick demonstrates how Gary follows him everywhere now, running around SpongeBob's house with Gary chasing after him. When SpongeBob tries to get Gary's attention, Gary doesn't even look at him. SpongeBob starts panicking. He tries everything to win Gary back, showing him his favorite slime-covered ball, offering him snail nip, even pretending to be trapped in his window. But Gary is too busy playing with Patrick to notice any of it. Finally, SpongeBob loses his temper and demands that Gary come home with him immediately. Patrick suggests they let Gary choose for himself. SpongeBob is confident Gary will pick him after all. He's the one who feeds Gary, houses him, takes care of him when he's sick, and massages his eye stalks when they're sore. But when Gary is given the choice, he crawls straight to Patrick. SpongeBob is devastated. What happens next shows how badly SpongeBob handles loss. Instead of accepting Gary's decision, he goes into complete denial mode. He gets a series of replacement pets to prove he doesn't need Gary. First comes Rex, a worm that SpongeBob claims is loyal and trustworthy. Rex immediately abandons him and hitchhikes out of town on a bus. Then SpongeBob brings home Larry, another snail with a terrible attitude. Larry hisses at his food, destroys his newspaper bed, takes over SpongeBob's actual bed, and shows no appreciation for SpongeBob's jokes. SpongeBob even mentions he has another pet named Jerry, but none of these replacements can fill the hole Gary left behind. When Patrick and Gary come over to do laundry, SpongeBob completely breaks down. He begs Gary to come back, promising there will be no rules anymore. Gary can destroy the furniture, use the whole world as his litter box, have 24-hour access to the fridge, and scratch up SpongeBob's prized driftwood carving of Squidward. SpongeBob is so desperate that he's willing to let Gary destroy everything he owns. Patrick tells SpongeBob to stop living in the past and face reality. Gary has made his choice, and SpongeBob needs to accept it. But then the truth comes out. When Patrick puts his shorts in the washing machine, Gary immediately crawls in after them. Patrick thinks Gary only liked him for his shorts, but SpongeBob realizes what really happened. Gary was attracted to the cookie in Patrick's pocket. Once Gary eats the cookie, he immediately returns to SpongeBob. The episode ends with SpongeBob and Gary reunited, while Patrick is left heartbroken saying, "I thought what we had was special." The lesson here is complicated and honestly pretty harsh. SpongeBob thought he was learning to let go, but it turned out Gary never actually wanted to leave. He just wanted Patrick's cookie. So in some ways, SpongeBob's refusal to accept the situation was vindicated, but the real lesson is about how we handle the fear of loss. SpongeBob's behavior when he thought Gary was leaving shows exactly what not to do. He became possessive, desperate, and controlling. He tried to replace Gary with substitutes instead of dealing with his emotions. He made wild promises he couldn't keep just to get Gary back. The episode teaches us that when someone we love seems to be pulling away, our natural instinct is to hold on tighter, but that desperation usually pushes people away even more. Real love means being willing to let someone go if that's what makes them happy, even when it destroys you. SpongeBob got lucky that Gary's departure was temporary and based on a misunderstanding, but most of the time in real life, when someone chooses to leave, they mean it. Learning to accept that reality with grace and dignity is one of the hardest things we ever have to do. What makes this episode particularly brilliant is how it shows both sides of the equation. SpongeBob experiences the pain of thinking he's been abandoned by someone he loves, while Patrick experiences the joy of thinking he's found a new companion. By the end, their roles are completely reversed. SpongeBob gets his happy ending while Patrick is left with the heartbreak SpongeBob was feeling throughout most of the episode. This reversal teaches us that relationships are fragile and can change quickly. The episode also shows us how our own insecurity can make us misread situations completely. SpongeBob assumed Gary was leaving him for Patrick when Gary was really just interested in food. How often do we jump to the worst conclusions about people's motivations, when the reality is much simpler and less threatening than we imagined? Before we get into our next lesson, make sure to subscribe and let's get back to the video. Now let's talk about a lesson that comes from procrastination, and it's something every creative person struggles with. The harder you try to force creativity, the more it runs away from you. Mrs. Puff assigns SpongeBob's class an 800-word essay on what not to do at a stoplight due the next morning. While everyone else groans about the assignment, SpongeBob is absolutely thrilled. He can't wait to get home and write what he calls the greatest essay of all time. SpongeBob sets up his workspace perfectly. He has his paper, his pencil, and the ideal writing environment. He's so excited that he kisses his pencil and little hearts fly out of it. He writes his title and his name, declaring the essay pure gold before he's even started the actual content. Then he tries to write the first sentence, and everything falls apart. SpongeBob spends hours staring at the blank page. He's written exactly one word, the. That's it. The more he tries to force words onto the page, the more his mind goes completely blank. So he starts looking for distractions to help his creativity. First, he decides he needs to get his blood pumping with some calisthenics. Then he feeds Gary an enormous amount of food, claiming he can't work knowing Gary might be hungry. After that, he cleans his entire kitchen until it's sparkling chrome because he can't work knowing there's a mess. When he finally sits back down, he's only managed to write the word "the" in fancy lettering, so he takes a break to pace around and think. Then he calls Patrick in the middle of the night, pretending he wants to have a conversation, but really just avoiding the essay. Patrick calls him out immediately, saying, "SpongeBob, you and I both know that you're just using me as a distraction, so you don't have to write your essay." When SpongeBob tries to deny it, Patrick hangs up on him. SpongeBob continues finding excuses. He gets distracted by eraser shavings on his paper, then needs water when he accidentally swallows one while trying to blow them away. That makes him hungry, so he spends time deciding between white bread, rye, or pumpernickel for a sandwich he never actually makes. When the mailman arrives with a package, SpongeBob tries to engage him in philosophical conversation about mail delivery chains. The mailman cuts him off with, "Don't you have a paper to write?" and walks away. SpongeBob starts getting paranoid that everyone knows about his essay. A news report on TV mentions his unfinished assignment. His furniture starts talking to him, trying to distract him further. His pants run away, his house catches fire, and everything spirals into a nightmare where all his possessions are conspiring against him. SpongeBob wakes up from this anxiety dream with only 5 minutes before class starts. He's still got just one word written. In desperation, he suddenly realizes that everything he did while procrastinating, feeding Gary, making sandwiches, calling friends, lighting candles, choking on eraser shavings, are all things you shouldn't do at a stoplight. He frantically writes down all his procrastination activities and finishes the 800-word essay just in time. When he gets to school, excited to turn in his work, he finds the classroom empty. Mrs. Puff explains that she had to cancel the assignment for a teacher's convention, and they're just going to take a field trip to see a stoplight instead. SpongeBob rips his essay in half, then rips himself in half. The lesson here is brutal, but important. Creativity cannot be forced. The more pressure you put on yourself to be creative right now, the more your brain shuts down. SpongeBob's best ideas came when he finally stopped trying so hard and just wrote down what had actually happened to him. Every writer, artist, or creative person knows this feeling. You sit down with the perfect setup, the perfect tools, the perfect environment, and absolutely nothing comes out. Then you spend hours doing everything except the creative work, telling yourself each distraction is somehow helping the process. The controversial truth is that most writer's block or creative blocks happen because we're trying too hard to create something perfect instead of just creating something. SpongeBob was so focused on writing the greatest essay of all time that he couldn't write anything at all. His breakthrough came when he stopped trying to write a perfect essay and just wrote about his actual experience. The irony is that his procrastination became the content of his essay. His failure became his success. The real lesson is that creativity flows best when you're not strangling it with expectations. Sometimes the best work comes from just starting with whatever you have, even if it's messy or imperfect. SpongeBob's essay ended up being exactly what it needed to be. Not because he forced it, but because he finally let it happen naturally. Stop trying so hard to be creative, and creativity will find you. Another crucial lesson surfaces in Shanghai, teaching us that getting exactly what you wish for might be the worst thing that could happen to you. SpongeBob is eating his Kelpo cereal when a massive anchor crashes through his house. He naively thinks the sky had a baby, while Squidward correctly identifies it as a ship's anchor. When the anchor shifts and destroys Squidward's house too, an angry Squidward climbs the anchor rope to complain to whoever dropped it, with SpongeBob and Patrick following behind. They discover the anchor belongs to the Flying Dutchman's ghost ship. SpongeBob innocently tells the Dutchman that Squidward wants to complain about his dirty ship and lazy anchor-dropping habits. The Flying Dutchman responds by repeatedly zapping Squidward with fire, then forces all three of them to become his ghostly crew for eternity. When Squidward keeps complaining, the Dutchman tosses him into the Fly of Despair, a chaotic dimension that looks like absolute nightmare fuel. SpongeBob and Patrick are terrified into cooperation, but they're terrible at being scary pirates. Their idea of frightening people involves magic finger tricks and bubble blowing, which completely defeats the purpose. Eventually, the Flying Dutchman gets fed up and decides to just eat SpongeBob and Patrick instead. They manage to steal his dining sock. Apparently he can't eat without it, which leads to a standoff. When they threaten to stretch out the elastic, the desperate Dutchman offers them 3 wishes in exchange for the sock's safe return. This is where everything goes wrong. Patrick immediately wastes the first wish by saying, "I wish we had known that earlier." The clock literally turns back 1 minute, accomplishing nothing except using up 1 wish. SpongeBob gets excited and wastes the second wish by saying, "I wish Squidward were here to see this," which teleports Squidward back from his safe escape at home. Now they're down to 1 wish, and all 3 characters start fighting over who gets it. The Flying Dutchman settles the argument using Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Moe, but the episode originally had 3 different endings depending on who won. In Patrick's ending, he wishes for gum that never loses its flavor. The Flying Dutchman eats all 3 of them, and they spend eternity inside his stomach still chewing gum and begging to be let out. In Squidward's ending, he wishes he had never met SpongeBob and Patrick. The wish is granted, but they're all still trapped on the ship. Now SpongeBob and Patrick don't know who Squidward is, so they try to introduce themselves while the Flying Dutchman eats them anyway. In SpongeBob's ending, he wishes the Flying Dutchman was a vegetarian. They think they've won when they appear back home, but they've actually been turned into fruit and placed in a blender. The now hippie Flying Dutchman chases them around his ship, trying to make a smoothie. Every single wish backfires spectacularly. The characters think they're being clever, but they're actually making their situations worse. Patrick's wish is completely pointless. Having eternal fresh breath doesn't help when you're trapped forever. Squidward's wish creates a monkey's paw scenario where he gets exactly what he asked for, but it doesn't solve his actual problem. Even SpongeBob's seemingly smart wish has a loophole that the Dutchman exploits. This episode perfectly captures why be careful what you wish for is such enduring advice. When people are desperate or stressed, they make wishes without thinking through the consequences. They focus on the immediate problem instead of considering how their solution might create new problems. Patrick wasted his wish on something trivial because he was nervous and spoke without thinking. Squidward made an emotional wish driven by frustration rather than strategy. SpongeBob came closest to a good wish, but even he didn't consider that vegetarians still eat plants. The real lesson here is that magical solutions to problems usually aren't as magical as they seem. If you could have anything you wanted with no effort or cost, what would go wrong? The answer is probably everything. The episode also shows how desperation makes people bad decision makers. When you're panicking about being eaten by a ghost pirate, you don't have time to carefully consider the exact wording of your wishes or think through potential loopholes. Real life works the same way. When we're desperate for quick fixes, we often make choices that seem good in the moment, but create bigger problems later. The Flying Dutchman represents how the universe tends to give you exactly what you ask for, not what you actually want. If you wish to never meet certain people, you might get that wish in the worst possible way. Sometimes not getting what you think you want is actually the best possible outcome. What makes this episode particularly brilliant is how it shows the difference between fantasy thinking and reality. All 3 characters had been dreaming of escape from their situation, but when they finally got the power to change everything, their fantasies crumbled under the weight of actual consequences. The episode also demonstrates how our wishes often reflect our character flaws. Patrick's wish reveals his tendency to focus on trivial things instead of important ones. Squidward's wish shows his selfishness. He'd rather erase his relationships than deal with minor annoyances. SpongeBob's wish, while more thoughtful, still shows his naive belief that changing someone's nature will automatically solve problems. In real life, we see this same pattern constantly. People wish for wealth without considering how it might change their relationships. They wish for fame without thinking about privacy. They wish for easier jobs without realizing they might become bored or unfulfilled. The episode reminds us that every solution creates new problems, and every dream come true opens the door to new nightmares. Here's another massive lesson that people seriously underestimate. Even small lies can spiral into bigger problems. Naughty Nautical Neighbors shows us exactly how one person's dishonesty can destroy relationships and create chaos for everyone involved. Squidward is having a peaceful day, enjoying his fancy souffle when SpongeBob and Patrick start playing with bubble messages in his backyard. They're whispering sweet things to each other through bubbles, totally innocent fun between best friends. But their laughter is ruining Squidward's quiet moment, so he decides to mess with them using what seems like a harmless prank. He takes some liquid from his souffle and starts making his own bubbles. But these bubbles carry fake messages. Squidward mimics SpongeBob's voice and sends Patrick a bubble saying, "Patrick, you are the dumbest idiot it has ever been my misfortune to know." Then he switches sides and sends SpongeBob fake messages from Patrick, calling him ugly and saying yellow is an ugly color. Each lie gets a little meaner, a little more personal. What makes this so brilliant is that Squidward thinks he's being clever. He believes he can control exactly what happens, make them fight, get some peace and quiet, then everything goes back to normal. Just a little white lie to solve his noise problem. But lies have their own momentum, and once you start, they multiply faster than you can control them. The fake messages work perfectly. SpongeBob and Patrick start yelling at each other, calling each other names, getting angrier by the minute. They declare they never want to see each other again and storm off to their houses. Squidward sits back with his souffle, laughing at how well his plan worked. But then, something unexpected happens. He chokes on his fork and starts dying. Patrick sees Squidward choking and saves his life with CPR. Suddenly, Squidward owes Patrick a debt, and he accidentally calls Patrick his friend while thanking him. Now Patrick thinks they're best buddies and wants to hang out. Meanwhile, SpongeBob is sitting alone in his house, drawing faces on his fingers because he's so lonely without his real friend. Squidward realizes his small lie created a much bigger problem. He wanted peace and quiet, but now he's stuck dealing with Patrick, who wants to be his new best friend. So he tries to fix things by manipulating the situation even more. He invites SpongeBob over and tries to make him his friend instead, but then Patrick shows up in his bathtub uninvited. Now both SpongeBob and Patrick are fighting over who gets to be Squidward's best friend. The situation keeps getting worse. Squidward's house becomes a battleground where SpongeBob and Patrick compete for his attention. They're angry at each other, Squidward is miserable, and everyone's relationships are completely messed up, all because Squidward thought he could tell a few harmless lies to get what he wanted. Squidward finally tries to fix everything by inviting both of them to dinner without telling either one that the other is coming. He thinks he can manipulate them back into being friends. But they just start competing to see who can drink the most soda to prove they're Squidward's real best friend. They drink so much soda they become completely bloated and refuse to even look at each other. But then something beautiful happens. SpongeBob hiccups and creates a small bubble that makes a funny burping sound when it pops. Both of them start laughing, and their laughter creates more bubbles. They remember why they liked each other in the first place and become friends again naturally. But all their bubble laughter creates so many bubbles that Squidward's entire house explodes. When Squidward comes back with more soda, his house is completely destroyed. SpongeBob and Patrick are friends again, which is what he wanted, but now his home is ruined. The small lie he told to get a moment of peace ended up costing him everything. He tells them to leave, and when he slams his door, a bubble pops against it and the door falls on his back. The lesson here is brutal, but true lies always cost more than the truth. Squidward could have just asked SpongeBob and Patrick to play somewhere else. Or he could have gone inside his house. Instead, he chose deception because it seemed easier and more satisfying. He wanted to feel smart and in control. But lies don't stay small. Each fake message led to bigger problems, more manipulation, and more complicated situations. What started as wanting quiet time ended with destroyed friendships, a ruined house, and everyone being miserable. The truth might have been awkward for 5 minutes, but the lie created days of chaos. SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship was strong enough to survive the lies, but only because they found their way back to honesty through genuine laughter and connection. Meanwhile, Squidward learned that trying to control other people through deception always backfires. Small lies become big problems because they force you to keep lying to maintain the illusion, and eventually the whole thing collapses. Our next lesson comes from one of the most underrated episodes that teaches us something everyone needs to hear. Take pride in the simple things, because joy doesn't need to be flashy. The paper shows us exactly how happiness works and why most people are looking for it in all the wrong places. Squidward is having a relaxing day outside when he tosses his used gum wrapper into SpongeBob's yard. When SpongeBob finds it, he gets excited and asks if Squidward wants it back. Squidward looks at this piece of trash and can't believe SpongeBob would even think about it. He calls it garbage and tells SpongeBob he can keep it forever. Squidward even makes SpongeBob promise never to give it back, no matter how much he might beg for it later. SpongeBob takes this worthless piece of paper and immediately sees endless possibilities. While Squidward goes inside to play his clarinet, SpongeBob starts having the time of his life with what most people would throw away without thinking. He uses it as a superhero cape, calling himself Super Sponge. Then he becomes SpongeBob Jungle Pants, wearing the paper as a loincloth and swinging around like Tarzan. Squidward watches from his window, getting more and more annoyed as SpongeBob finds new ways to have fun. SpongeBob turns the paper into a parachute, a bullfighting cloth, and does impressions by putting it over different parts of his face. He even does something called oral gammy, where he puts the paper in his mouth and shapes it into birds, snowflakes, and paper dolls with his tongue. Every single thing SpongeBob does with this paper is creative, joyful, and entertaining. Kids start cheering for his origami performances. He turns the paper into a puppet that tells jokes and makes everyone laugh. He uses it as helicopter propellers to fly around. He even plays music on it, correcting Squidward's off-key clarinet playing with a perfect jazz version. Meanwhile, Squidward tries to prove that his expensive hobbies are more fun than SpongeBob's stupid paper. He reads his science magazine, takes a relaxing bath, and paints fruit. But he can't enjoy any of it because he's too busy being jealous of how much fun SpongeBob is having with something so simple. Squidward gets a paddle ball, a ventriloquist dummy, and a fancy shell car, but SpongeBob's paper activities are more entertaining than all of them. The jealousy eats Squidward alive. He can't stand that SpongeBob is having more fun with garbage than he is with all his sophisticated possessions. So he demands the paper back, but SpongeBob reminds him of his promise. Squidward gets desperate and starts offering to trade his belongings for the paper. He gives SpongeBob his TV, his furniture, his house, and finally even the shirt off his back. When Squidward finally gets the paper, he thinks he's won. He's sure that now he'll have the same amazing time SpongeBob was having. But when he tries to do the same activities, nothing works. His impressions are boring. His origami comes out as a wet ball of paper that gets booed, and he can't fly with it like SpongeBob did. The paper doesn't magically make him happy like it did for SpongeBob. Then Patrick walks by, takes the paper from Squidward, and uses it to wrap his chewed gum before throwing it in the trash. All of Squidward's possessions are gone, and he has nothing to show for it. He's left standing there with no house, no clothes, asking if anyone has sunscreen. The brutal truth this episode teaches is that happiness comes from your attitude, not your stuff. SpongeBob found joy in a piece of trash because he approached it with creativity and enthusiasm. Squidward had everything money could buy but couldn't enjoy any of it because he was focused on what he didn't have. He wasted his time being jealous instead of appreciating what was right in front of him. When he finally got the paper, it couldn't make him happy because happiness was never about the object itself. SpongeBob shows us that you can find entertainment and meaning in the simplest things if you're willing to use your imagination. Most people think they need bigger, better, more expensive things to be happy, but SpongeBob proves that joy comes from how you see the world, not what you own. The lesson hits different because we live in a culture that constantly tells us we need more stuff to be fulfilled. Social media makes this worse by showing us everyone else's highlight reels while we compare them to our ordinary moments. But SpongeBob takes literal garbage and turns it into hours of genuine entertainment, while Squidward loses everything chasing something he thought would make him happy. The episode reminds us that contentment comes from within, and that the most meaningful experiences often cost nothing at all. SpongeBob's pure joy with simple things reveals how much happiness we miss when we're always looking for something better. Make sure you're subscribed to us, and now let's get started with our next lesson. Let's talk about a lesson that most people need to hear, but society constantly tells us to ignore. Your emotions are valid, and you shouldn't suppress how you feel. Valentine's Day delivers this message in a way that's both shocking and completely honest about how emotional pain actually works. SpongeBob is having the perfect Valentine's Day, giving gifts to everyone in Bikini Bottom. He's planned something special for Patrick, a massive chocolate hot air balloon that Sandy is going to fly into the Valentine's Day Carnival. SpongeBob builds up this gift all day, telling Patrick he has the greatest, most fantabulous present ever waiting for him. Patrick gets so excited he can barely contain himself, bouncing around and begging to know what it is. Everything starts falling apart when chocolate-eating scallops attack Sandy's balloon. She gets thrown off course and tells SpongeBob to switch to Plan B. But there is no Plan B. SpongeBob is stuck on top of the Ferris wheel with Patrick, who's expecting this amazing gift, and Sandy is nowhere to be found. SpongeBob panics and does what most people do when they can't deliver on their promises. He lies and pretends everything is fine. When Patrick asks for his gift, SpongeBob gives him a handshake, a friendly handshake. After building up expectations for hours about the greatest present ever, Patrick gets a handshake. Most people would say Patrick should just be grateful and understanding, but the episode doesn't do that. Instead, it shows us exactly how devastating this kind of disappointment feels. Patrick tries to be positive at first. He tells himself that a handshake isn't much, but the thought that counts. He's trying to convince himself that being disappointed is wrong, that he should just accept whatever he gets and be happy about it. But then he starts seeing other people getting real gifts from SpongeBob: chocolates, roses, even a bike for someone he just met that morning. The comparison is what breaks Patrick. He realizes that everyone else got actual presents while he got a handshake. He was asking for the same consideration SpongeBob gave to strangers. When someone asks Patrick for the time, he finally snaps and screams, "Patrick needs love too," before going on a complete rampage through the carnival. Patrick becomes absolutely destructive. He rips apart the Heart mascot costume, breaks rides, steals a little girl's lollipop, and terrorizes everyone at the carnival. People run screaming as Patrick goes full rage mode, and the episode doesn't try to make his anger seem cute or funny. He's genuinely scary and out of control. Most cartoons would make Patrick the villain here, but Valentine's Day does something revolutionary. It validates his feelings while showing the consequences of suppressing them. Patrick spent the whole day trying to be understanding and positive about his disappointment. He told himself he was being unreasonable for wanting more than a handshake, but all that suppressed hurt and anger had to go somewhere. When SpongeBob and the crowd get cornered at the dock, Patrick is ready to hurt people. SpongeBob admits he deserves Patrick's anger, but questions whether the innocent bystanders do too. Even then, Patrick says they didn't get him anything either, so they're all targets. The emotional pain has made him see everyone as enemies. Sandy finally arrives with the repaired chocolate balloon just as Patrick is about to attack. Everyone screams at Patrick to turn around and see his real gift, but he refuses. He's been hurt so badly that he can't trust that anything good is actually happening. Only when Sandy calls his name does he finally turn around and see the massive chocolate balloons SpongeBob and Sandy had planned for him all along. The moment Patrick sees his real gift, all the anger disappears. He jumps on the balloon with pure joy, accidentally popping it and covering everyone in chocolate. Then he tells SpongeBob he didn't have to get him anything at all. The anger was never about wanting stuff, it was about feeling forgotten and less important than everyone else. The episode teaches us that emotional pain is real and deserves to be acknowledged. Patrick wasn't wrong for feeling hurt when he thought SpongeBob cared more about strangers than his best friend. Telling someone to just be grateful or stop being so sensitive just forces them to hide the pain until it explodes. Society constantly tells us that negative emotions are bad and we should suppress them, but Patrick shows us what happens when you bottle up hurt and disappointment. The rampage wasn't because Patrick was evil, it was because he tried so hard to be understanding that the pain had nowhere else to go. The real lesson is that acknowledging your emotions doesn't make you weak or ungrateful. Patrick's feelings were completely valid, and the episode never says he was wrong for being hurt. The problem was how he expressed those feelings after suppressing them for so long. The next lesson tackles something that ruins more projects than bad planning ever could. Don't let ego destroy teamwork. Band Geeks shows us exactly how pride can sabotage success and why sometimes the best leaders are the ones who get out of their own way. Squidward gets a call from his high school rival Squilliam Fancison, who brags about leading a fancy band that's supposed to play at the prestigious Bubble Bowl. But Squilliam can't make it and offers Squidward the chance to replace him, knowing full well that Squidward doesn't have a band. Instead of admitting the truth, Squidward's ego kicks in and he lies, claiming he does have a band and they'll definitely play the Bubble Bowl. Now, Squidward has to create a marching band from scratch in just 1 week. He puts up flyers all over Bikini Bottom promising musical fame and free refreshments. The townspeople show up, but when Squidward asks who has musical experience, nobody raises their hand except Plankton, who asks if instruments of torture count, and Patrick, who wants to know if mayonnaise is an instrument. From day one, Squidward approaches this like a dictator instead of a teacher. He assumes he has enough talent for everyone and treats the band members like they're idiots. When they can't repeat his clarinet notes properly, he gets frustrated. When Patrick kicks Sandy during practice, causing a massive fight that ends with Patrick's body stuck inside a trombone, Squidward just watches in horror. The practices get worse every day. Flag twirlers spin so hard they fly into a blimp and die in an explosion. Plankton exhausts himself running back and forth across a giant harmonica. By day 4, Squidward is desperate and decides that playing louder will make them sound better. The result is so terrible it breaks all the windows and deforms Squidward's face. Then Squidward makes his biggest ego mistake. He tells them to play so quietly that nobody will hear them, basically giving up on the performance entirely. But the band members start arguing with each other. Mr. Krabs and Harold fight about having big, meaty claws. Someone calls SpongeBob a talking cheese. The whole thing turns into a massive brawl where they use their instruments as weapons. When practice ends, Squidward completely loses it. He tells them they took his one chance at happiness and crushed it into tiny pieces. He says he expected better from them and calls himself a loser for believing in them. Then, he storms out, telling them not to bother showing up because he'll just say they all died in a marching accident. But here's where the episode gets brilliant. After Squidward leaves, SpongeBob doesn't defend Squidward's leadership or make excuses for his behavior. Instead, he asks the band members what kind of monsters they are for failing someone who came to them in his hour of need. He reminds them that Squidward has always been there for them when it was convenient for him. SpongeBob takes over as conductor and tells everyone to pretend Squidward was a fireman or ambulance driver, someone they actually respect, so they can pull together and discover what it means to be in a marching band. The key difference is that SpongeBob approaches it as teamwork instead of ego. At the Bubble Bowl, Squidward is ready to cancel everything when Squilliam shows up to watch him fail. But then the band appears in perfect uniforms, ready to perform. Squidward is forced to conduct them, expecting total humiliation. Instead, they perform Sweet Victory flawlessly. The crowd goes wild, Squilliam faints from shock, and Squidward finally gets his moment of triumph. The controversial truth here is that Squidward was actually a terrible leader, even though he was the most musically talented person in the group. He let his ego and rivalry with Squilliam turn him into a dictator who blamed everyone else for his failures. The band only succeeded when SpongeBob took over and made it about the team instead of one person's pride. Squidward spent the whole week trying to prove he was better than everyone else instead of helping them become better together. He treated the band members like obstacles to his success rather than partners in achieving it. His ego made him see their lack of experience as stupidity instead of an opportunity to teach and grow. The episode shows that real leadership means putting the team's success above your own pride. SpongeBob didn't have Squidward's musical knowledge, but he had something more important: the ability to inspire people to work together toward a common goal. When the focus shifted from Squidward's ego to the team's potential, everything changed. Most people think leadership is about being the smartest or most talented person in the room, but Band Geeks proves that the best leaders are often the ones who trust their team enough to step back and let everyone contribute. Squidward's greatest victory came not when he controlled everything, but when he finally conducted a group that had learned to work together without his ego getting in the way. There's a lesson here that most adults have completely forgotten: not everything needs to be taken seriously. FUN shows us exactly what happens when someone who spent their whole life scheming and plotting finally discovers that sometimes just goofing off is more powerful than any master plan. Plankton steals a Krabby Patty from the Krusty Krab using an elaborate disguise and escape plan. SpongeBob chases him all over town until Plankton finally gives up, overwhelmed by SpongeBob's relentless cheerfulness during the pursuit. When everyone in town celebrates SpongeBob as a hero and calls Plankton a loser, SpongeBob feels bad for him and decides to be his friend. SpongeBob shows up at the Chum Bucket and asks Plankton to come out and play. Plankton has no idea what that means. When SpongeBob suggests jellyfishing, Plankton asks if he knows how to induce thermonuclear fusion. The guy literally can't understand the concept of doing something just for fun. His computer wife Karen sees this as the perfect opportunity for revenge and tells Plankton to pretend to be SpongeBob's friend so he can steal the Krabby Patty formula. SpongeBob takes Plankton jellyfishing and tries to explain the rules. You catch jellyfish, then you let them go. Plankton asks what happens after they eat them, completely missing the point. When SpongeBob explains that catching jellyfish is about fun, not winning, Plankton asks what fun is. So SpongeBob teaches him the FUN song. F is for friends who do stuff together, U is for you and me, N is for anywhere, anytime at all. But Plankton sings his own version. F is for fire that burns down the whole town, U is for uranium bombs, N is for no survivors. Even when someone's trying to teach him how to have fun, Plankton turns it into destruction and chaos. His brain can only think in terms of winning, losing, and causing mayhem. SpongeBob doesn't give up. He physically grabs Plankton and makes him dance while singing the real version of the song. Something amazing happens. Plankton starts to feel tingly inside and actually enjoys it. For the first time in his life, he's doing something without any evil purpose behind it. They spend the day frolicking through flowers, playing ukulele, nose-picking, and sharing gum. Plankton is genuinely having fun. Mr. Krabs watches through a telescope and assumes SpongeBob is being tricked, but the truth is more complicated. Plankton goes home that night telling Karen about all the fun activities he did, and she has to remind him about his mission to steal the Krabby Patty. Plankton is so caught up in enjoying himself that he completely forgot about his scheme. Karen shows Plankton that he's even wearing square pants like SpongeBob. He's going native, becoming the kind of person who does things just because they're enjoyable, rather than because they serve some larger purpose. For someone who spent his entire existence plotting and planning, this is a complete personality transformation. When SpongeBob and Plankton go to the movies, Mr. Krabs sets up a test. He puts a Krabby Patty right in front of Plankton to see if he'll take it. Plankton resists. He says he's saving his appetite for popcorn. He's actually choosing fun over his obsession with the secret formula. SpongeBob defends him to Mr. Krabs, insisting that Plankton has changed. But during the movie, SpongeBob discovers that Plankton does have a Krabby Patty in his pocket. SpongeBob is heartbroken and asks how long Plankton was planning to betray him. Plankton admits he originally planned to trick SpongeBob, but then says that SpongeBob showed him friendship, and that's all he ever really wanted. For a moment, it seems like the lesson is about the power of genuine friendship to change people. But then Plankton reveals he was lying again, grabs the patty, and tries to escape through the movie screen. He crashes into concrete, gets flattened, and loses the patty anyway. The controversial truth here is that Plankton actually was changed by experiencing fun, but he chose to go back to his old ways because being evil is too much fun. The episode shows us that sometimes people reject happiness and choose misery because they're more comfortable with familiar patterns, even when those patterns don't work. SpongeBob's approach to life, doing things just because they're enjoyable, being silly without purpose, finding joy in simple activities, temporarily transforms someone who had spent years consumed by anger and schemes. The FUN song, W, was actually a philosophy that could have saved Plankton from his miserable existence. Most people live like Plankton, treating everything as serious business that needs to serve some purpose. They can't just play without it being productive or meaningful. SpongeBob shows us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to take life so seriously and just enjoy the moment for what it is. Here's a lesson that hits way too close to home for most people: don't give in to peer pressure when you know something is dangerous. Hooky shows us exactly how friends can talk you into doing stupid things even when you know better, and why standing your ground might save your life. Mr. Krabs bursts into the Krusty Krab in a complete panic, screaming about the hooks being back. He warns everyone, especially SpongeBob, that these fishing hooks are deadly traps. They look appealing with their bright colors and free cheese, but they'll drag you to the surface where you'll be cooked, eaten, or worse, sold in gift shops. Mr. Krabs makes it crystal clear that SpongeBob should never go near them. SpongeBob takes this warning seriously and gets genuinely scared. He hides under a box and promises to stay away from the hooks. But then Patrick shows up at the kitchen window, claiming there's a carnival in town and pressuring SpongeBob to come play with him. SpongeBob initially resists, saying he can't leave work, but Patrick convinces him it's just a break. When they arrive at the carnival, SpongeBob immediately realizes these are the dangerous hooks Mr. Krabs warned him about. He tries to stop Patrick from touching them, explaining that Mr. Krabs said they're really dangerous. But Patrick completely dismisses these concerns, sitting on a hook and claiming he senses no danger. He even eats cheese off the hooks, putting multiple hooks in his mouth at once. SpongeBob keeps trying to remind Patrick about Mr. Krabs' warnings, but Patrick keeps pressuring him. When Patrick gets dragged up by a hook, SpongeBob panics, thinking his friend is going to die. But Patrick floats back down, laughing, explaining that you just jump off before reaching the surface. He makes it seem easy and safe, directly contradicting everything Mr. Krabs said. Patrick keeps pushing SpongeBob to try it, asking if Mr. Krabs specifically said not to ride the hooks like horses. When SpongeBob admits Mr. Krabs didn't say that exact thing, Patrick uses this technicality to justify ignoring the spirit of the warning. SpongeBob gives in and starts playing on the hooks with Patrick, having a blast and thinking it's harmless fun. Mr. Krabs eventually finds them and is horrified. He explains that if they don't float back down, they'll end up vacuum-packed in a tuna can with nothing to look forward to but the smell of mayonnaise. Both SpongeBob and Patrick apologize and make a sailor's promise never to go near the hooks again. But the next day, Patrick shows up again, pressuring SpongeBob to break his promise. He calls Mr. Krabs a big dummy and asks if SpongeBob is going to listen to him or to Patrick. Even though SpongeBob promised and knows the dangers, Patrick's constant pressure starts wearing him down. Patrick goes off to play on the hooks by himself, taunting SpongeBob and saying he knows SpongeBob wants to join him. SpongeBob sees a hook in the middle of the street and initially resists, telling it that it's a liar and deceiver. But the temptation becomes too much and he gives in, asking if the seat is taken before sitting on the hook. This time, he gets genuinely stuck. The hook is caught in his pants and he can't get free. SpongeBob runs to the Krusty Krab in terror, realizing he's actually in danger now. Mr. Krabs finds the hook deeply embedded in SpongeBob's pants and tells him there's only one solution: he has to take his pants off in front of Pearl and her friends. When SpongeBob removes his pants, they discover the hook is also caught in his underwear, forcing him to choose between potential death or extreme embarrassment. The episode reveals this was all a setup by Mr. Krabs and Squidward to teach SpongeBob a lesson about following safety rules. SpongeBob ends up humiliated, running home in shame, while Patrick gets dropped off trapped in a tuna can, asking for a can opener. The brutal truth here is that peer pressure works because friends know exactly how to exploit your desire to fit in and have fun. Patrick E. used social pressure, making SpongeBob feel like he was being overly cautious or missing out on fun. Even when SpongeBob had clear warnings from someone with experience, Patrick's influence eventually won out. The episode shows that standing up to peer pressure is about remembering that the people pressuring you won't face the consequences of your choices. Patrick walked away fine while SpongeBob faced the real danger. When friends pressure you to ignore safety warnings or do dangerous things, they're not looking out for your best interests, even if they think they are. Most people learn this lesson the hard way, just like SpongeBob did. The episode reminds us that sometimes the fun choice is actually the dangerous choice, and that real friends respect your boundaries instead of constantly pushing you to break them. If you're enjoying our content, make sure you're subscribed. Another crucial lesson that people need to understand is that self-sabotage ruins success. Suds shows us exactly how fear and bad decisions can turn a simple problem into a disaster, and why sometimes the thing you're avoiding is actually the thing that will save you. SpongeBob wakes up in the middle of the night craving a snack, so he makes himself a peanut butter and jellyfish jelly sandwich. But as soon as he takes the first bite, he falls asleep at the table, leaving his refrigerator door wide open all night. By morning, his entire house is frozen solid, and SpongeBob has caught the suds, an illness that makes him sneeze pink bubbles and feel terrible. Gary immediately tells SpongeBob he should stay home and rest, but SpongeBob refuses to admit he's sick. He insists he doesn't get colds, he gets the suds, and then denies having the suds even though he's clearly sneezing bubbles. He puts his underwear over his face like a mask and goes to work anyway, convinced he can power through it. At the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob is obviously sick. He's pale, shaking, and can barely function. When Mr. Krabs asks what's wrong, Gary appears and explains that SpongeBob has the suds. SpongeBob tries to serve a Krabby Patty but sneezes so hard that it splatters all over Mr. Krabs' face. Mr. Krabs immediately sends him home, not because he's mean, but because he can't have SpongeBob sneezing all over the food. Back home, SpongeBob finally admits he's sick and calls Sandy to take him to the doctor. But then Patrick shows up and fills SpongeBob's head with horror stories about the doctor's office. Patrick claims he knows a guy who went to the doctor once, and describes it as a horrible place where they make you sit in waiting rooms, read old magazines, and use freezing cold stethoscopes. SpongeBob gets so terrified that he begs Patrick to be his doctor instead. Patrick agrees and immediately starts giving SpongeBob the worst possible treatments. He plugs up all of SpongeBob's holes with corks to stop the bubbles from coming out, which just makes SpongeBob inflate every time he sneezes. Patrick then performs a series of increasingly ridiculous procedures, making sandwiches on SpongeBob's feet, pulling out his tooth, jumping on him, and repeatedly ripping off bandages. Every single one of Patrick's treatments makes SpongeBob worse, but SpongeBob is so afraid of the real doctor that he convinces himself Patrick's methods are working. He even calls Sandy to cancel her help, insisting that Dr. Patrick has everything under control. Meanwhile, SpongeBob is becoming more and more swollen and sick. When Sandy arrives anyway, she immediately sees that SpongeBob is in terrible condition. His breath is so bad it kills plants, and he's inflated to the point where he can barely move. Sandy tries to take him to a real doctor, but Patrick fights her for control of SpongeBob, claiming he's a good doctor and that SpongeBob is his patient. During their argument, SpongeBob gets launched into the air and rolls uncontrollably down a hill toward the Krusty Krab. He crashes into the restaurant and sneezes so violently that the explosion of bubbles completely destroys the building. Mr. Krabs is furious, but finally SpongeBob gets taken to a real doctor. The doctor prescribes the sponge treatment, where a human hand named Hans uses SpongeBob to clean various objects a man's back in the shower, dishes, cars, and floors. SpongeBob loves every minute of it, laughing and enjoying the process. When it's over, he's completely cured, back to his normal yellow color, and feeling amazing. He even gets a giant lollipop as a reward. Patrick, jealous of the lollipop, tries to fake having the suds by blowing a bubble. The doctor sees right through this and gives Patrick his own special treatment being used to scrub a cactus and clean a toilet, which is painful and humiliating. The brutal lesson here is that SpongeBob turned a simple medical problem into a major crisis through pure self-sabotage. His fear of the doctor led him to make every possible wrong choice. He ignored his symptoms, refused proper help, trusted someone completely unqualified, and let his condition get so bad that it destroyed property and endangered others. The real doctor's office turned out to be nothing like Patrick's horror stories. The treatment was actually fun and effective, and SpongeBob loved the whole experience. All of his suffering was completely unnecessary, created by his own fear and poor decision-making. Most people do this same thing in smaller ways every day. They avoid difficult conversations that would solve problems, delay medical checkups that could catch issues early, or refuse help because they're embarrassed. SpongeBob shows us that the thing you're most afraid of is often exactly what you need most. The episode teaches that self-sabotage makes problems worse. Success requires facing your fears and accepting proper help, not hiding from reality and trusting unqualified people to fix things they don't understand. Time for a lesson that most people learn too late. Friendship is more important than pride. The Fry Cook Games shows us exactly how competition and ego can destroy the relationships that matter most, and why winning means nothing if you lose the people you care about. SpongeBob is training for the Fry Cook Games, representing the Krusty Krab in what he calls the greatest day of his young life. He's doing push-ups and chanting about bringing honor and glory to his workplace. Patrick shows up and asks if he can play in the games, but SpongeBob tells him only fry cooks can compete. Patrick scoffs and says being a fry cook looks easy, just flipping patties. This insult triggers a massive argument. SpongeBob gets offended and tells Patrick that fry cooks are an elite corps, not just anybody can do it. Patrick mocks SpongeBob for polishing his fingernails, and SpongeBob fires back that Patrick doesn't even have fingernails or ears. They start calling each other names Conehead, Yellow, Pink, until Patrick storms off, vowing to become a fry cook just to prove SpongeBob wrong. When the games begin, Plankton reveals his competitor, Patrick Star, who's been working at the Chum Bucket for almost 5 minutes. SpongeBob is shocked and feels betrayed that his best friend is now representing the rival restaurant. Both Mr. Krabs and Plankton immediately start manipulating their champions, turning a friendly competition into personal warfare. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob that Patrick was never really his friend and that he's plotting SpongeBob's downfall. Plankton tells Patrick that SpongeBob thinks he's better than everyone else and that squares are the shape of evil. Both coaches pump up their fighters by convincing them that this is personal, not just about the restaurants. The competition begins with events like deep fry pole vaulting and chocolate high diving. SpongeBob and Patrick are evenly matched, trading victories and insults throughout. During the chocolate high dive, SpongeBob creates an elaborate banana fudge pop with toasted almonds, while Patrick does a simple strawberry cone with chocolate dip. They're both excellent, but they've stopped having fun and started treating each other like enemies. The final event is bun wrestling, and both friends have been transformed by the competition. They're muscular, angry, and completely focused on destroying each other. When the bell rings, they rip off their robes to reveal impossibly buff bodies and dive at each other in pure rage. What follows is brutal. They wrestle viciously, using dirty tactics and trying to genuinely hurt each other. Patrick licks SpongeBob's foot to torture him, making him scream in agony. SpongeBob retaliates by erasing part of Patrick's name tag, changing Patrick to Rick, which makes Patrick yell, "My name's not Rick!" They're no longer competing for their restaurants, they're fighting because they hate each other. The competition has turned them into enemies who want to cause real pain. But then something beautiful happens. During their final struggle, both of their pants rip off, revealing their underwear. SpongeBob is wearing pink underwear, Patrick's favorite color. Patrick is wearing yellow underwear, SpongeBob's color. Despite all their anger and competition, they've been wearing each other's colors the whole time. When they see this, they both start crying and realize what they've lost. They hug and promise never to fight again, walking out of the arena hand in hand while the crowd boos. Mr. Krabs and Plankton are furious, demanding they come back and kill each other, but the friends ignore them completely. The controversial truth here is that SpongeBob and Patrick threw away their friendship over something completely meaningless. The fry cook games didn't matter. The rivalry between Mr. Krabs and Plankton wasn't their problem. They let other people's agenda turn them against each other when they should have been supporting one another. What makes this even more tragic is that their conflict started over professional pride. SpongeBob felt insulted when Patrick suggested fry cooking was easy, but instead of explaining why his job mattered to him, he attacked Patrick's worth as a person. Patrick, feeling disrespected, decided to prove SpongeBob wrong rather than apologize for minimizing his friend's passion. The episode shows how quickly outside voices can amplify small disagreements into major conflicts. Mr. Krabs and Plankton didn't create the tension between SpongeBob and Patrick, but they expertly exploited it for their own purposes. They convinced two best friends that their friendship was fake and that they were secretly enemies, all to win a meaningless competition. Most people do this same thing. They let competition, politics, work drama, or family feuds destroy friendships that took years to build. They choose sides in conflicts that don't really involve them, or they let their ego convince them that being right is more important than being kind. Social media makes this worse by encouraging people to cut off friends over political disagreements or career jealousy. The episode shows that real friendship survives competition. SpongeBob and Patrick could have competed while still caring about each other, but they let outside influences poison their relationship. The underwear reveal proved they never stopped caring about each other, even when they were trying to hurt each other. The lesson is that you can replace trophies, jobs, and achievements, but you can't replace true friends. SpongeBob and Patrick realized that walking away together was better than winning apart, and that's a lesson most adults never learn. They chose love over pride, friendship over victory, and each other over everyone else's expectations. Finally, let's talk about a lesson that social media has made everyone forget. Reputation isn't everything, character is. Big Pink Loser shows us exactly what happens when you chase awards and recognition instead of focusing on who you actually are and why the most meaningful achievements often come from just being yourself. Patrick wakes up to find a package shoved in his mouth containing a shiny gold trophy. He gets incredibly excited, showing it off to rocks, jellyfish, and even jumping above the surface to show Bikini Atoll Island. He's never gotten an award before, and he's thrilled to finally have recognition. But when he shows it to SpongeBob, they discover the trophy actually belongs to SpongeBob. It's for outstanding achievement in achievement, SpongeBob SquarePants. Patrick becomes devastated when he has to give up the trophy, but his disappointment turns to despair when SpongeBob accidentally reveals an entire closet packed with awards. Patrick starts crying, saying he'll never get an award because he's never done anything. SpongeBob tries to cheer him up by suggesting he get a job at the Krusty Krab, thinking that if Patrick works like SpongeBob, he'll eventually earn recognition too. Mr. Krabs gives Patrick a job paying $50 an hour, while SpongeBob mentions he had to pay Mr. Krabs $100 an hour when he started. Squidward immediately quits upon learning Patrick was hired. SpongeBob tries to train Patrick, but every task becomes a disaster. When Patrick is supposed to deliver food to customers, he eats it before it reaches the table. When he's assigned to answer the phone, he gets angry when people ask if they've called the Krusty Krab, shouting, "No, this is Patrick!" because he doesn't understand that's the restaurant's name. Even sweeping becomes a problem when Patrick uses the wrong end of the broom, and a customer asks if he just blew in from Stupid Town. When a delivery man arrives with more awards for SpongeBob, Patrick loses control completely, smashing the broom on the floor repeatedly and filling the restaurant with dust. He's convinced he'll never win a trophy because he can't do anything right. SpongeBob gives Patrick one final, simple task: opening a jar. Even this proves difficult at first, with Patrick grabbing pickles, spatulas, taking off his pants, and even picking up SpongeBob instead of the jar. But when SpongeBob tells him to do exactly what he does, Patrick finally succeeds in opening the jar. They celebrate this small victory, and SpongeBob tells Patrick that if he keeps doing exactly what SpongeBob does, he'll have an award someday. Patrick takes this advice to an extreme. The next day, he shows up dressed exactly like SpongeBob and starts copying his every move, word, and mannerism. The citizens of Bikini Bottom think they're seeing double. Patrick follows SpongeBob to work, mimics his cooking techniques, and even copies his accidents. When SpongeBob tries to prove Patrick is copying him by putting his hand on a hot grill, Patrick does the same and burns himself, while SpongeBob reveals he was using a fake hand. SpongeBob becomes increasingly frustrated with Patrick's imitation, but Patrick insists he needs to copy SpongeBob to win awards. The copying becomes so intense that Patrick even paints his rock to look like SpongeBob's pineapple house. When SpongeBob tries to make Patrick stop by dressing like Patrick and acting lazy, Patrick calls his old self a big pink loser and refuses to go back to being himself. But then something beautiful happens. A delivery man arrives with another trophy, and this one is actually for Patrick. It's awarded for doing absolutely nothing longer than anyone else. Patrick realizes that his natural lazy lifestyle was actually an achievement in itself. He gets excited about protecting his new title and immediately goes back under his rock to fall asleep, returning to his true character. The controversial truth here is that Patrick spent the entire episode trying to become someone else to earn recognition, when his authentic self was already award-worthy. He thought being lazy and unproductive made him a loser, but it turned out those qualities were actually his greatest strength. The award he earned was for being consistently, authentically Patrick. Most people make Patrick's mistake. They try to build a reputation by imitating successful people, posting the right things on social media, or presenting a version of themselves they think others will respect. But real character comes from being genuine, consistent, and true to who you are, even when that seems unremarkable. SpongeBob had a closet full of awards because he was authentically enthusiastic and hardworking. Patrick earned his award by being authentically lazy and relaxed. The lesson is that reputation is what others think of you, but character is who you actually are, and eventually, authentic character will be recognized and rewarded, even if it takes time. The episode teaches that chasing other people's achievements will only make you miserable, but embracing your own unique qualities, even the ones you think are flaws, can lead to unexpected recognition and genuine satisfaction. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.